this guy from the Gray Zone, Liam Cosgrove. Cosgrove is talking about Israel, and the bones stick out of this so much when Tim clearly tries to change the subject. And then Cosgrove brings him back to it after like 2 or 3 minutes. But it was, for some reason, and let's hold off on our speculation, because it would be irresponsible for us not to speculate as to why Tim is so worried about weighing in on what's going on with Israel-Palestine. I mean, just a reminder. Yes, there are people in an open air prison in Syria that is ostensibly run by like the Kurds, but like the ISIS inside it has been, made it very difficult. There is a famine in I think it's Darfur, and this is, there's a lot of like horrible things going on in the world. One of the reasons why there's so much attention. I mean, personally, I spend this attention in part because I grew up, learning about Israel in a way that I had not learned about any other country on the planet. But also, Israel is gets $3 billion a year from us.
Yeah, the world record holder for foreign aid recipients.
And we also have vetoed numerous resolutions in the UN protecting Israel. And remember, the reason why Israel exists is because of the UN, right? So when people say, well, it's the UN, well, that's what the whole basis of Israel is founded on, the permission structure of the UN. So there's a United States relationship with what's going on with Israel is fundamentally different from just about any other country. I mean, even when you think about Ukraine, Europe is providing a lot of weaponry to Ukraine. They are not doing that with Israel.
I mean,
we as a country are, uniquely enmeshed in this conflict with Israel and Palestine.
So much so that one of the other top recipients of our military aid is Egypt, which, if you've been following the news lately, Tim, they control the other side of the border in Gaza, and they are a big part of maintaining the apartheid system and the open-air prison that is Gaza as well.
Okay, and so here is this guy from the Gray Zone who comes from I think it was the Von Mises Institute and Lou Rockwell. So a hardcore libertarian, which I think is probably accurate description of at least some of the people over there. The Lou Rockwell crew were also Ron Paul, and somebody there was responsible for all those racist emails that get sent, but we haven't been able to figure out who. Probably the intern. And but here is this guy.
Well, NATO, we just use NATO as it's not, we're pulling the strings of NATO. My point is, I would argue Israel is pulling a lot of our strings in terms of foreign policy.
I think you're wrong. I think we're pulling the strings of Israel. That's really what's going on, because Israel is an intelligence and military asset for us in the Middle East. So when we are staging...
But how is it an asset if they've gotten us into all the major conflicts?
No, those are our wars. Those are our wars.
Okay.
NATO is not getting us involved in...
Pause it for a second. Really unclear what the military asset is. What's our military agenda? They were, without a doubt, and I, of course... vehemently opposed our invasion of Iraq from, years before we actually did it. But Israel was a liability that we had there. We basically had to shut them down. In fact, I think we were specifically not even flying a craft from Israel over Jordan as a way of making sure that Jordan wasn't implicated. Whether they're an intelligence asset seems pretty dubious.
At least in its effectiveness.
I mean, I don't know what it is that we're supposed to know. They lie about Iran. They have clearly their own agenda. Anybody could say that. Like, I've never even heard anybody make the argument outside of like the sort of more general, they're the only democracy in the Middle East, as if A, we ever cared about that, and B, it was true. But that's not even what Tim is saying. They're saying that they're an important asset to us, and this is not, like.
Well, maybe he's being inarticulate, and it's about how like they receive a ton of.
I think there's debate on this issue. I genuinely, I think Tim's overstating it to a certain extent, but I think like America does. I think like, and the Western powers over the course of this entire time period has not wanted a unified region in that area, and I think like this is part of the divide and conquer strategy.
And they also they're a big cash cow for arms dealers. Like, I mean, they receive a ton, or they're big buyers, and the military aid is like mutually beneficial for Israel and the weapons manufacturers here in this country.
All right, well, let's continue here.
All the major
No, those
conflicts
are
that
our
we've
wars.
been in-
Those are our wars.
Okay.
NATO's not getting us involved in things. We're getting NATO involved in things, and Israel's not. You see my
Correct.
point?
I agree on NATO. I don't agree on Israel. There are some
your
Americans.
position makes no sense.
Okay, there are some, but I mean, like the founding neocons who the PNAC group, those guys were Americans, but they basically did all that for Israel. So
I think Australia is roping us into this
pause
war.
it for 1 second.
I mean, absolutely. They did that for war and military,
Well, it was U.S. hegemony.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically it was
Right.
just U.S. hegemony. The whole plan for the Project for a New American Century was they saw Israel as an important beachhead, but the whole plan was to basically nurture low-level conflicts that would prevent some type of like other superpower to arise. And a big part of like going into Iraq was literally to make sure that we had control of the fuel that China would ultimately need to fuel their economy.
We got explicitly into that on Left Reckoning with Robbie Martin just a week ago. Like the first PNAC letter was about Kosovo, had nothing to do with Israel Palestine, right? It was just warmongers mongering war.
Specifically in the New World Order, the idea that we would go from two superpowers to one hyperpower, for there to be a hyperpower, us, it would require low-level conflicts around the globe that could never sort of like explode into something more than even like a limited regional thing. So there was never an opportunity for any type of alliance to form to challenge us as a hyperpower and bring us back down to the level of superpower. I mean, it was.
But I mean, the guy said at the beginning that Israel's pulling the strings of the United States. I mean, that gave me a little bit of an indication that maybe his perspective on this is like a little bit.
Well, I think the point is that certainly we're not dictating to Israel what they should do.
To the extent we should be, given how much we're investing.
Yes.
Well, we're not using our leverage. Is the real point.
The point is that this is an issue of colonialism and powers and those power structures that never really fully went away, as opposed to some kind of like shady conspiracy behind the scenes that's being alluded to here, which I find more disempowering and not necessarily one that's like intersectional.
Again, like we talked about with Robbie Martin, PNAC, like a lot of those guys were like Iran Contra. Like this is like the basically the military, high connected military fascists.
But they basically did all that for Israel. So
I think Australia is roping us into this war with China. Why are we sending ships and personnel to Australia?
That's actually a super good
in
point.
2002, Tim.
Did they even send us any kangaroos? What is this?
You
What the
guys
hell's
know about what's going on with Australia and China, right?
Yeah, they're having big issues, and that's why we sold Australia a whole bunch of like
Weapons.
weapons and
Yep,
stuff
yep,
like
yep,
that for
yep.
the.
And there's food issues and dairy issues. It's been wild. It's been going on. So when I went
pause it
10
for 1
years ago
second.
to
And I want to explain something that you cannot see on your camera, and that is the look of utter confusion on Matt's face, where he's like, "Wait a second." The turn, like Tim was so afraid to engage in this issue that he did such a hard turn to something totally different, such a non sequitur. And what is interesting though is that the people around there on his show all get the sense of like, oh, all hands on deck
jump in
moment.
now.
All hands on deck moment. Tim doesn't want to talk about Israel. Now, it's fascinating as to why he's so afraid to talk about this or so reluctant to talk about it. But let's just watch the sort of parade. And this guy tries to bring it back around, and it really pisses Tim off.
There's food issues and dairy issues. It's been wild. It's been going on. So when I went 10 years ago to New Zealand, I started learning about the conflict between Australia and China. New Zealand is partially involved in, and the things China's been doing in this region of the world is massive. I mean, they're building these naval bases and air force bases on the atolls. They're manufacturing islands to establish power. They're sinking Vietnamese vessels. I mean, the threat here is tremendous. And
Can you pause it?
Taiwan,
Actually, I'm sorry, because this is so incredible, because he says he's so anti-war, and he made a gesture towards it before. No, the deal that the United States did with Australia was actually an escalation against China from our perspective, where we increased our presence and we also reopened military bases in Southeast Asia as well too, in order to put more of a presence in the area surrounding China, and that was a part of the deal that we did with Australia. So, like, he says he's so anti-war and all this stuff, but it's the United States that is attempting to show its force in China's backyard, which we would never stand for in our own.
I would recommend a video posted 13 days ago. It has 3.3 million views by Boy. It's titled "We Snuck into a CIA Base in the Aussie Outback." It is a very good watching.
Okay, I just continue just a little bit more with this. It's sort of fascinating.
Sinking Vietnamese vessels. I mean, the threat here is tremendous, and Taiwan is roping us into it. I think the real issue is Taiwan, China. Why are we involved in this? Do you know what's going on with China and Taiwan and how much money we spend and how many personnel we have in Taiwan?
Meanwhile,
I think the
it's just a continuation of the
Taiwanese are
Cultural
lobbying
Revolution.
us so that they can get us involved in their regional conflict.
Tim, I agree, and there is some of that, but the reality, like, you must know this. I mean, the reality in terms of dollar value, the reality in terms of espionage, leverage, like Jeffrey Epstein, who I would imagine you would agree has a lot of links to Mossad and is likely a Mossad asset.
I'll tell you what I think.
Do you think that?
I think that the obsession with Israel undermines the foreign policy argument that I and many other libertarians have.
It's not an obsession with Israel.
Other libertarians-
We just talked about planes for 30 minutes.
Israel is not going to be number one. Ukraine is.
And in terms of all-time funding, it dwarfs Ukraine.
See, Ukraine lobby, the president is coming here and demanding we pay for his war.
Yes, and so did the president of Israel in 2000.
And guess who's number one?
Wow.
What right
Ukraine.
now? Right now
Ukraine
it's
is number
Ukraine.
one.
Right now it's Ukraine.
So why
There's a lot of
are you
pushback
worried about
against
number
Biden.
two?
Because it's been. I mean, this is a decades-long thing. And if you go back,
This is sort of fascinating. It's so weird what's going on here. I mean, this isn't just like, Tim Pool's like crappy take on something and just pure ignorance.
He turned down an Epstein segment.
But also, I mean, our Secretary of State sat in on their war council in Israel. We didn't do that with we
sent him a general.
I mean, we're definitely at a high level involved in Ukraine's war planning
And
too.
why are
I
you
would
talking
agree.
about number
but
two
yes.
when it's not number one? Like, it's fascinating. There is a story here. I don't want to belabor this anymore because it's quite clear he does not want to talk about this. And I don't know if he's got like YouTube data that suggests that like if he talks about Israel, he's going to lose some funding, or if some of his funding comes from somewhere there. It's
that part. I would just, for historical purpose, Tim Pool once lectured my NYU class, taught by a guy who, Lyle Leibovitz, who wrote for Tablet about how those fake Palestinian crisis actors filming the atrocity porn. So like covering himself really in, I think, disglory, despite being a good teacher. But anyway, I think Tim Pool has always done this. Tim Pool has, with Emma previously, but that was like I knew to have Emma push on the Israel thing because this is a pronounced pattern for Tim Pool. He wants to pull short on criticizing
Can we listen
Israel.
to that? This sounds self-indulgent, but look, I talk on camera for a living, so that's kind of inherent. This part in our debate when he couldn't answer about Israel is fascinating to me when you put it in this context.
geez,
too.
when was this debate you had with Tim Pool?
June of less than a year ago, June 2023.
He looks like he's really aged. What's going on? He's had a rough go of it.
I'm telling you, the lighting there is ferocious.
Switch back. Just 1 second. Just switch back to the other.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second.
Is it me? I mean, he looks like he's aged. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
A little stress since that time.
Well, he's got the 2 extra bedrooms in his house now.
For all his kids in the future.
Of the war, then I would say the left is more pro-war and to the right of me on war.
I'm completely anti-war, but the war happened because Russia invaded, and now Ukraine is trying to defend itself.
Right. So you're anti-war, you oppose war.
Yes.
But you're to the right of me when it comes to Ukraine.
I don't think so.
Do you believe that the U.S. should be supplying and aiding the Ukrainians?
I do believe so because
Who
they're
gets that
defending
money?
themselves.
Who gets that money?
The military.
But
they're defending
Raytheon,
themselves.
Northrop Grumman, Lockheed
Yeah,
Martin.
totally.
Yeah, I'm opposed to all of that.
I mean, look, if
You're to the right of me on
if
that
you
issue.
believe that Russia should be able to invade Ukraine and take territory without recourse, then I mean that's pro-imperialism. That's not, and that's still pro-war.
No,
Yes, it
a lot of
is.
people around the world do a lot of bad things. I don't think the U.S. should be an empire going and funding wars all over the world.
We're not funding wars. We're funding the defense. I mean,
Like-
and there's something that you can be said where should we draw a certain line? I have already conceded that strings should be attached and we should be involved in peace negotiations. But to flatten the power dynamics here, I mean, I would imagine this is like the same argument that you hear when it comes to Israel and Palestine, right? Where Palestinians are defending themselves, and then it's, oh my gosh, they are just it's completely symmetrical. Israel and Palestine. These are 2 actors just battling it out.
So you're in favor of intervention there?
I would love to fund the Palestinians so that they were able to have a better
You are
life
to
for
the right
themselves.
of me on foreign policy.
Well, we already fund Israel, dude.
Yeah.
Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I don't have an answer to.
You're in favor of funding military.
no.
We fund the Iron
Me,
Dome.
literally-
Yeah.
So I would just
he
say-
moves on from that quite quickly.
Who do you think supplies Israel with those weapons? It's not Raytheon. It's Jim Stevenson's. It's Jimmy's weaponry.
Here's a piece from a Jacobin from October 28th. Military contractors are framing the Israeli war on Gaza as a win for investors. Just a little bit, the Israeli situation obviously is a terrible one, frankly, and that's just what evolving as we speak, said Jason Aiken, Chief Financial Officer and Executive Vice President of General Dynamics. But I think if you look at the incremental demand potential coming out of that, the biggest one to highlight, and that really sticks out, is probably on the artillery side.
Number go up.
Yeah. So anyway, look, that's my favorite clip probably from that, and like completely relevant in this current time when he has to address it to a degree, and it's being brought up on his program by the Gray Zone guy. But he immediately tries to pivot off of it to something else, to something where he can be China hawkish. Like, how is that making him more anti-war than anyone on the left when he's consistently talking about how China's this real threat in the world? It's
a
just so
talking point.
silly. I know.
It's a
So
talking point
strange.
from the whole constellation there, the whole Rumble style simulated libertarian, simulated anti-war shit, all that stuff. We're more anti-war, and God, I wish we could still focus on Ukraine instead of having a position on Israel.
Totally.
It's so strange, though. I mean, that's. But I don't know. Maybe someone who is someone who has access to what's going on in the compound there. Sometimes we get emails from people. I'm not saying that we get one specifically from there or not. But if there was that would be an interesting question that we would have.
Who's getting in Tim's ear?